Please be seated, everyone. Right. Good evening, members and officers of the Council and members of the press and public. I welcome you to this extraordinary meeting of the Council of the 7th of October 2019. We have but a single item of business this evening, but effective deliberation and the decision and effective decision-making should enable a satisfactory outcome to the betterment of this Council this evening. So first of all, fire evacuation procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the building. Webcasting of proceedings. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Filming of the meeting. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film the meeting this evening? I have one. Is there anyone else? No. So we have one person filming this evening. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. But no one has. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any items of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of press and public from the meeting. There are restrictions on the use of mobile phones. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber while this meeting is progress. Everyone has presumably... yes, Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you begin the agenda proper, I certainly feel safer having heard the fire instructions. On a serious note, I have a point of order, Mr. Chairman, before we hit the agenda proper. For reference, it is the Constitution, Part 4, Rules of Procedure, Meetings of the Council. Section 1.3, Extraordinary Meetings. Extraordinary meetings can be called A, by resolution of the Council, B, by the Chairman of the Council, C, by a statutory officer of the Council, D, by any 5 members, providing they have duly signed a requisition specifying the business to be considered. Mr. Chairman, we have an extraordinary meeting on the 10th, and it's obvious when you look at the agenda, the meeting shows a front sheet to introduce the item, and that sheet names the lead member and the 4 supporting signatories, and it outlines specifically the business to be discussed. Tonight, there is no such front sheet, so there is no record of who called the meeting, nor even a record of the specific business to be discussed. I received an email this morning stating that the Labour group had called the meeting because they had concerns. Concerns, I might add, that should be dealt with in the first instance by the Constitutional Review Working Party and the Standards Committee before being brought to full council. Mr. Chairman, I cannot see the concerns of a political group on the list in section 1.3 as a legitimate reason for calling this meeting. So I have 2 questions, and with your kind permission, after they've been answered, perhaps I could be given the opportunity either to withdraw the point of order or to finish the point of order. Can members please be advised of the named members who signed the requisition and called this meeting, and can we be advised of the specific item of business to be discussed on that letter? If the requisition is available to view this evening as a duly signed hard copy or an electronic copy, could it please be read out? For the moment, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Piper. And I would turn in first instance to Democratic Services to help me on this issue.
have a short adjournment just to...
Councillor Piper, we intend a short adjournment in order to procure the paperwork and provide members with all the details, and hopefully that will be to your satisfaction. I'm just going to adjourn the minute just for a few minutes while we attend to that. Members, can I call you to order? Are we ready? Councillor Piper, I have before me the formal request for an extraordinary council meeting received from Councillor Everett, and the reason for it given: in accordance with the Council's constitution, we, the undersigned, formally request that the document to which formed item 13 on the July the 11th 2019 revised, if they have not been amended by the Constitutional Review Working Party and standards to incorporate such amendments, are brought before an extraordinary meeting of the Council for consideration and adoption. And I have the 5 signatories as Councillor Everett, Councillor Steve Alban, Councillor Ruth Duckworth, Councillor Peter Campbell and Councillor Heather Keane. Councillor Piper.
I'm sorry, I may have missed. Did it say to discuss issues that have been made by constitutional review or have not?
It's if.
It says, I shall read again. In accordance with the Council's constitution, we, the undersigned, formally request that the documents which formed item 13 on July the 11th, 2019, revised, if they have been amended by the Constitutional Review Working Party and standards, to incorporate such amendments, are brought before an extraordinary meeting of Council for consideration and adoption. That is the exact wording. Councillor Piper. Councillor Piper, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That word "if" is a really important a really important word. If they have been amended. Chairman, I'm sure I don't need to advise you, but in fact, Constitutional Review Working Party met and suggested a number of alterations to the July paper. They were to go to a standards committee and then come to this council. There has been no standards committee, at least there hasn't been one that's advertised and available to see. And so therefore, if the specific business was to discuss the alterations, if they have been made by constitutional review, and they haven't yet been ratified, then I would argue, Mr. Chairman, with great respect, that because Part 4, Agenda for Extraordinary Meetings, Section 2.3, where it says that we consider the business set out on the notice for the meeting, it concludes no other business to be transacted. The business to be discussed related to changes to that document, no such changes have been made. Standards Committee has not met. Therefore, this meeting, I respectfully suggest, Mr. Chairman, should not be held. So I respectfully request that you close this meeting with no further discussion or action to take place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Piper, I hear what you say. I have there's some dispute here as to actually whether that is what has been said. I call upon Councillor Everett, who would like to make a point in clarification.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make the point of clarification, which is that the letter actually says amendments which have been made by Constitution Review Working Party and standards. And the "and" is important. If they've been properly constituted, they could come before council. As they haven't been to standards, they can't come before council. So the only thing that can come before council is the document which has been to both Constitution Review Working Party and standards and was put to council on July the 11th. For your reassurance, Councillor Piper, it doesn't mean that we on this side haven't taken account of the important discussions that took place at Constitution Review Working Party, as will become apparent. But I believe that this meeting has been properly called by the Chair and that we should proceed with it.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Can we proceed further? Councillor Piper, I presume you're satisfied with that explanation.
No, I'm not, but it's your decision, with great respect, Chairman. The business to be discussed has to be specific, and no other business is allowed to be discussed. And I'm sorry, but for me, that is not specific enough, and I respectfully request you close the meeting with no further discussion.
However, Councillor Piper, it is my decision as chairman, and we will continue with the meeting. Moving on to apologies for absence, agenda item 1. Apologies have been received from Councillors Hart, Paul Moore, Ovenden and Scott. Are there any other apologies for absence this evening? Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Crittenden. Councillor Constantine. Councillor Day. And that seems to be it. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 2, declarations of interests. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? I'll take that as a no. Agenda item 3. I refer you to agenda item 3, standing orders in relation to staff, changes to the Constitution, senior officers' employment rules. Our principal reason for being here this evening. I call upon the monitoring officer for introduction.
Thank you, Chairman. To some extent, my introductory comments have already been brought forward. All I would say is this is the report which came to July Council but was withdrawn before consideration by the Council. It has, after, in accordance with the view expressed at Council, gone back to the Constitution Review Working Party. They have partly considered those matters and we're seeking advice from the JNC Chief Officers on clarification of the points raised at that Constitution Review Working Party. So that's where we are now. And these the amendments to the Constitution are here before you for consideration and adoption today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I call upon Councillor Everett. Would you like to speak on behalf of the business we have this evening, which we've called?
I would. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your indulgence Thank you to members for coming out tonight for this extra meeting, which I'm sure wasn't the most welcome invitation from the Council.
Councillor Everett,
Yeah.
I've just made a big mistake.
Go to the-
Every chairman makes a mistake in a while, and I've made one this evening. I should first of all have moved the recommendation as set out in the report to be adopted. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Everett, back to you. I'm very sorry. My apologies. Please carry on as if you hadn't been interrupted, or indeed start
Okay.
again. Thank you.
So, as we've clarified, our reason for calling this meeting tonight is because the lack of a lawful adopted process for disciplinary matters relating to the statutory officers is profoundly unsatisfactory and is causing disquiet inside and outside this council. Council began the work to adopt such a process through the Constitution Review Working Party in June, but when it was brought to Council in July, it became clear that members were unhappy with one aspect of it in particular, which is the process of the sifting of allegations against the statutory officers to determine whether or not they are disciplinary matters as defined in the 1993 legislation, because it was felt that it made the statutory officers the decision makers on that matter. Now, I'm only aware of that as a principal objection to what was brought to Council. It may be that other members have got other things to say, but that's what I'm aware of. When General Purposes convened on September the 2nd, members were advised by an external trainer that if the Council showed urgency in adopting a lawful process, then that had potential to offer it a level of protection. The process before us tonight has previously been agreed by both the Constitution Review Working Party and the Standards Committee. But we are not asked to approve the sifting process. There is nothing in the recommendations which adds the sifting process to the Constitution, which means that if members have no other objections to bring forward, there's no actual reason why we can't tonight adopt a lawful process. Furthermore, at the meeting of the Constitution Review Working Party on September the 24th, members agreed to remove one paragraph from the flowchart in Appendix 3, and Mr Howes made clear that officers had no objection to it being removed, and that is the paragraph which relates to the sifting process. In fact, the flowchart doesn't form any part of the recommendations before the Council this evening, as it isn't even referenced there. For that reason, I don't believe that we would be amending the recommendations from the Constitution Review Working Party if we changed or removed it. Similarly, paragraph 5.1 in the officer report, which relates to this matter, does not form part of the recommendations either. We are not asked to incorporate the officer's report into the Council's constitution. What our investigations have uncovered is that there is no legal requirement for the statutory officers to do the sifting. Members clearly feel that members should do the sifting. But whatever lawful route forward we find, Council needs to find a way to adopt a lawful process. We cannot continue not to have one. And I accept that there may be further improvements to the process which has been brought forward in the future, which are consistent with the J&C model, which we should be following. I need to finish this, if you don't mind.
With your, have my indulgence.
For example, dividing general purposes into 2 subcommittees of 5 members in order to make the disciplinary process more manageable. But in general, the process put forward appears to be acceptable, subject to other objections that members may have. Accordingly, I want to move the following amendment, which does not change the recommendations which came forward from Constitution Review Working Party and Standards. And I've shared this with the monitoring officer. And it is to add item H, which says that Council expresses its dissatisfaction with the process set out at paragraph 5.1 in the report and advises the Constitution Review Working Party that he is unable to support it. That the related paragraph in the first box of the flowchart forming Annex 3 be deleted, and requests that Constitution Review Working Party brings forward a lawful and practical alternative proposal for sifting allegations against the statutory officers that does not involve the statutory officers being the decision makers in that process. That's what I'm moving.
Have we got a seconder for that, please? Councillor Campbell. Do I have any other speakers? Move the amendment. It's not technically speaking. We are debating it first of all. Do you wish to speak on this matter, Councillor Piper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reference in the communication we've all been set, and I'm certainly not challenging your motives or anything like that for doing what you are doing. The reference to Annex 1 is in fact Annex 2, to be found on page 21 of the document that CRWP, Constitutional Review Working Party, received on the 24th of the 9th, 2019. Our recommendations have been made, as I mentioned, to standards, which has not yet met to consider them. We did ask for a speedy meeting. The reference to Appendix 3, top panel, is in fact Annex 4 on page 35 of the same document. Again, the recommendations, which are in fact different to today's offering, have also been made by Constitutional Review to standards who have not yet met to consider them. For example, it may be an oversight, but no provision is made in the insert suggested for complaints made by members of the public. And I believe that's very important. It simply suggests complaints from members of staff. We've just had in the amendment a reference to paragraph 5.1 on page 16 of Annex 1, but that was missing from the original recommendation. We made important recommendations, Chair, following lengthy discussions, and standards have not yet met. I too received the mandatory training. Mine was at a later date on the 29th of September, and the result of that training, my recollection of it, is that though we do not have a fully compliant system in place, we should not rush into anything. Rather, we should carefully consider our responses and follow due process within this council. We were further advised to get advice from other councils. Indeed, the monitoring officer promised to get independent advice from outside the area. Some of us have in the meanwhile been engaged in collating advice from different councils around the country. Mr. Chairman, the monitoring officer's own advice to the Constitutional Review Working Party on the 24th of September concerning the document that's been brought forward to Council this evening was as followed. Agenda item number 4, Introduction and Background, paragraph 1.2, page 8. This is quoting the monitoring officer. I felt that Council is not the proper forum for such a detailed consideration, and it was better that the standing orders be brought back to this committee, i.e. Constitutional Review Working Party, rather than risk them not being approved at Council. On that point, Mr. Chairman, the monitoring officer is absolutely right. Full Council is not the place to consider such detailed changes, and we must allow due process. CRWP has met and made recommendations. The next stop, therefore, is standards. Anything we approve this evening, whatever the motive, is certainly unconstitutional and would warrant a robust challenge in any disciplinary proceedings that might follow. May I please finish, Mr. Chairman? It's 2 sentences. We simply cannot support this paper tonight with or without the changes, not least, I believe, because it would be irresponsible for us to approve a faulty document with some sort of vague promise we'll put it right later. The people of Thanet deserve much better. So I believe, Mr. Chairman, that by continuing this debate, by the possibility that this may be passed and it's unconstitutional, we would be interfering with our own processes and legitimate procedures. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Piper. Do I have any other speakers? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your words, Councillor Everett. I have to say, item H sounded awfully like an amendment to me, and it was rather wordy. I got as far as writing 5 words down and then got no further, which in itself suggests to me that we ought to have some time to consider this because it is a big change to what was put before the Constitution Review Working Party and before standards. So in my opinion, it is a big amendment. And actually, I thank Councillor Everett for pointing out the fact that in this process that we're supposed to be adopting, there is actually no reference to the JNC model. It is not one of the recommendations that you're adopting the very model that we're trying to put in place. So I think for that reason alone, we need to throw this out, because it it is a nonsense. We are including, even though we're saying that we express concerns about references to the filtering process, you know, there are more issues that need to be discussed thoroughly. The monitoring officer has agreed to remove the wording from the actual disciplinary procedure, that is Appendix 3, and I feel that this whole process has been deeply muddled by combining the disciplinary procedure that basically we're trying to adopt, which is the JNC model, which has also been agreed by the Kent monitoring officers, and yet here we have additional items that are part of the filtering process. I believe, and I share, I'm sure the Labour Party, I think all members here share the belief that we must have a disciplinary procedure as soon as possible. And I would have suggestions how that could come about, but voting this through is not the way to do it. I suggest that the Constitution Review Working Party meets as soon as possible to discuss the very worthy suggestions made on October the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and then standards are already due to meet on the 7th. We could then have an extraordinary council meeting on the 13th of November. We will be waiting a month to have a procedure that we can all agree on. I think that's really important that we have a procedure we all agree on and not rush through for the sake of one more month. We've waited a year. This should have been in place a year ago. We waited 11 weeks for the Constitution Review Working Party to be actually agreed to meet. There is no mention in this report of the findings of that meeting. For all those reasons, I urge members to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Stevens. The monitoring officer would like to give some clarification at this point.
Yes, the provisions of the JNC are included in the report in that they are involved in the revised standing orders as set out in the report. So you don't refer to it, they simply adopt those procedures and they are set out in the report already. So it does include the JNC procedures.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Stevens, you'd just like to come back briefly?
If I can, then actually that goes against what we've said already, that the JNC, the model Annex 3, Appendix 3, isn't included. The monitoring officer says it is included. Therefore, we're being asked to adopt something that members don't agree with. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens, thank you very much. The monitoring officer has given clarification and he is a professionally recognised man engaged by the council. Do I have any other speakers? Councillor Everett, would you like to carry on with your...
Well, yeah, I mean, just a bit of a clarification, and I think Councillor Piper was actually commenting about an amendment I circulated outside this meeting, which I've not put forward tonight, and I understand that there will be some confusion around that. But having taken further advice, I decided not to bring that amendment to this council meeting. So I apologise for the fact that you obviously were expecting us to bring that, but that isn't what we put forward. And just to be clear to members generally, and Councillor Stevens in particular, the Labour Group has not proposed any amendment to the council's constitution. The Labour Group has not proposed anything which would change what has been put forward in the process. What we've asked is Constitution Review Working Party to do things, and given the Council's opinion to Constitution Review Working Party, which I would have thought was a good idea. That's our proposal. I accept that if you don't pass the recommendations as a whole, then it doesn't go forward. But I think our view is, and I think the view of all of this council, is that we do not want the statutory officers to be the decision makers in disciplinary processes about themselves. I think that's very clear. We need to find a lawful and proper way to achieve that. And how we do it, I don't really mind, but we need to get on with it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Everett. I've got... who is it? Councillor Potts. Councillor Potts, sorry, I couldn't see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think how we can actually vote on something until it has gone to standards. We said it should go to standards, and until it has gone to standards, I don't see how we can take a vote on it.
Thank you, Councillor Potts. Do I have any other speakers? Councillor Linda Piper.
Thank you, Chair. This document, as Councillor Stevens said, this should have been put in place a year ago. It was before us in July and taken away because it wasn't fit for purpose. No changes have been made to that document. Standards haven't agreed it, and we should not be voting this through. Thank you.
I've got some more clarification from the monitor officer.
So the clarification was it wasn't withdrawn because it was not fit for purpose. It's because there was a concern about a single aspect of it to do with the filter mechanism.
Do we have any further speakers on this? Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Excuse my voice. It's virtually gone, but there's enough to say a couple of words. I mean, it does seem to me that we're in a position at the moment where, there's kind of general agreement on a principle, but disagreement on the ways that we get there. And quite honestly, it does seem to me that perhaps the best thing is to wait until we're in a position where the whole thing can come forward, having been through proper process, been through a Constitutional Review Working Party, approved by standards, and then comes for ratification to this council. So unfortunately, I do find myself in this situation agreeing with Councillor Piper, sort of.
Thank you for bringing some levity into this evening, Councillor Bayford. I propose to go to a vote now on the proposal provided by Councillor Everett. I have Councillor Potts again.
Can we have a recorded vote, please?
I'm sure we can. Does anybody object to a recorded vote this evening? We're all happy with that? Right. We'll proceed to a vote, members. We go through the list. You ready? Oh, well done. See, I wouldn't have thought of that. Right.
So this is just on the amendment, just on whether to accept his amendment or not.
Councillors, the monitoring officer can now conduct the recorded vote.
Sorry, just to clarify. Yeah, just to clarify, this is a vote on the amendment to the original proposal at the moment. Councillor Alban. Councillor Ara. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bailey. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Jill Bayford. Councillor Robert Bayford. Councillor Boyd. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Coleman Cook. Councillor Curry. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Duckworth. Councillor Everett. Councillor Farrance. Councillor Fellows. Councillor Game. Councillor Garner. Councillor Green. Councillor Gregory. Councillor Hopkinson. Councillor Huxley. Councillor Keane. Councillor Cupp. Councillor Pat Moore. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Stuart Piper. Councillor Potts. Councillor Pugh. Councillor Rourke. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Roper. Councillor Rozecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage.
Against.
Councillor Scobie. Councillor Shrub. Against. Councillor Stevens. Against. Councillor Taylor. Against. Councillor Tomlinson. Against. Councillor Towning. Against. Councillor Whitehead. For. Councillor Wing. Against. Councillor Wright. Against. Councillor Yates. For.
Members, I have a result, and that amendment has been lost. We now fall back on the substantive motion. Do I have any speakers on that? I don't see anyone who wishes. Councillor Yates. Sorry, Councillor Hopkinson, got your name wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of want to say something about the previous thing we voted on, but I just wanted to assert that it does seem to me that although the Chamber's split on that vote, there's more agreement about the substance of what we actually want than disagreement. So I do think it's important to assert that actually we probably do feel largely the same about what we're trying to get to. I totally do appreciate the concerns of Councillor Piper and Stevens. I do personally think that our amendment did incorporate the concerns of what we talked about in the Constitutional Review Party, of which I'm a member. So I just wanted for that to be stated and for that to be known that actually, although the Chamber seems split on that, there's actually, I think, a fair amount of agreement on what we do actually want to see changed.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Now that we're on to the substantive motion, can I please just repeat one paragraph? The advice of the monitoring officer to the Constitutional Review Working Party was, and I quote, "I felt that the Council is not the proper forum for such detailed consideration, and it was better that the standing orders be brought back to this committee rather than risk them not being approved at the Council." I don't know that anything has changed since he wrote that advice, and on that point he is absolutely right. Full Council is not the place to consider such detailed changes. We cannot therefore support.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Piper. Councillor Everett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We won't be supporting the motion as proposed without the amendment because our point was that it needed to be made very clear that this Council wants a different process for sifting allegations, and I'm sorry that members couldn't vote for it, but nevertheless, what I would ask, however, is that officers bring forward this process and get on with it as quickly as possible, because we really do not want to wait until the December Council meeting to have the process brought back to us. I really think it needs to be expedited, and I think all sides would agree with that.
Councillor River, are you actually saying that you withdrawn your original motion?
No, the amendments.
Sorry, the amendment, yes. The amendment's fallen. Members, a little bit of clarification for me there. We're going to have a vote now, proceed to a vote. Those in favour, those against of the motion. Could I have those? Councillor Rozecki, would you like to say something brief?
Sorry, no, we changed our mind. It's okay.
Can we proceed to a vote, therefore? Those in favour? Those against? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. That concludes tonight's business. Thank you very much.